Hey guys, it's me Filip, welcome to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create fully procedural Versailles floor texture in Substance Designer. Let's get right into it. Quick note before we jump into Substance Designer, the video would be way too long if I did the whole texture in just one go, so I decided to split it into two videos. The first one will be height map, and the second one will be for roughness, diffuse, and how to set it up in Octane. So we will open Substance Designer, create new substance called Versailles floor. I open some references here in Pure Ref. I think this top one is the best reference for what we're gonna do. It's not gonna be exactly the same because this shape here is a bit problematic to create fully procedurally, but it will be very close to this, I think. Okay, so we're gonna start by creating a single tile, and then we're gonna clone it with Tile Sampler to get a bit of a bigger patch of the floor so it's not so repetitive. Okay, so we will start by adding a shape node. We're gonna keep it as square and we're gonna scale it down to 0.9. This way we are trying to create this frame around the tile. Next we're gonna add invert grayscale. That way we have a white border around it. Now we're going to add checker. We're gonna drag it up here and or we can actually drag it down here. And we're going to rotate it 45 degrees and just one tile. Now we're gonna bring in blend. We're going to plug the checker at the top blend input and our border into the middle input. Actually, let's just drag it over here. We will set the blending to multiply, and we're gonna go 0.25. It's quite good to, in this specific case, to go 0.25, 0.5, and 0.75. I will explain this a bit later when we get into the masking. Okay, now we're gonna add weave generator. It might seem like odd choice, but weave generator will give us this overlapping kind of look that we have here. We will first tweak the gaps. Yeah, I think 0.5 and 0.5. Oh, maybe 0.75, 0.75. Yeah, that seems quite good. We are trying to match the thickness of this to the thickness of the border because these seem to be similarly thick. You know, these ones and these ones. Oh, I forgot to mention that we will not be doing this. Instead, I decided to do diagonal dividers. I think they look pretty cool, and I think it's much easier to do that rather than doing these. Okay, so now we're gonna grab blend node. Now we're gonna create transform 2D because we need to rotate this 45 degrees. We will grab this. Actually, let's grab this one first, and we will rotate it 45 degrees. Now we're gonna plug it into our blend. Now you're gonna go and add lighten, but now you can see that this is actually overlapping around it, so we're gonna use this as our mask. See, now there is separation, so we're gonna lower this to 0.5. Let's plug it into the first output for now so we can see it better. Now we need to match it to this one, so we will grab Alt and we will scale it up right about there, and then we will move it down here. But you can see there is a problem that we would get these divisions here, which we don't want. So instead of doing this exact shape, I decided to do this shape. It's, you know, I think it's very similar style. It's just, you know, it's actually quite similar to this one. Maybe it's exactly the same, but it's basically the same shape. It's just slightly offset. So, you know, we can do it like this. Now we will, yeah, so I think this is pretty good. Yeah, I mean, might be some errors, like little overlap here. You can play with it a bit more and scale it up and down until you're happy with it, but I think that for the sake of this tutorial, this should be fine. Now we're gonna plug it back into the mask 1 output. Now we're gonna copy and paste the blend and the transformation. And we will plug the transformation into the bottom mask, which will give us the other planks. All we need to do now is to plug this here, and we will go 0.25. It's quite important to keep the gray values that have enough contrast, because we will be using those as a sort of like material ID map later on to assign different wood textures to the tile, because obviously you can see that the grain is going like this on the diagonal ones, it's going like this on the other ones, and it's going this way on the border ones. So in order to do that, we need to basically have enough of a difference between the gray values. We will bring in edge detect, and we will plug this in, zero out the edge roundedness, and go for something like 1.1. Yeah, I think this is brilliant. Okay, now we will bring in tile sampler, and we will plug it into the first input. In tile sampler, we will select pattern input, and we will go 3 by 3. In tile sampler, we're gonna scroll down to scale. We will change it from 0.8 to 0.998 or something around that. Basically, we want to match the thickness of these edges there. So let's try 9985. Yeah, that should do it. And now we'll move on to a float fill. Float fill is amazing node which basically detects shapes and then fills them with gradients. It's a really great way of creating height variation and randomization on pretty complex textures like this, because there is no other way we could create the variation in this case. Now, from float fill, we can create float fill to grayscale, and this will help us get flat variation for each of these. So we will plug this into here, and we will grab clouds 3, for instance, and we will plug it into the grayscale input. And now if you open it, you can see that it created this height variation for us. It is based off of the values of this noise. So you can see that here where the noise is quite dark, we get a little bit of a darker spots. The same over here, darker spot, so it corresponds to these. But unfortunately, having these gaps could be a little problematic. So a workaround to get rid of these is to grab a distance, and we will plug the float fill to a source input of the distance. And now we will grab levels, and we're gonna plug the float fill grayscale to the levels. We're gonna, well, let's just do it like this. We're gonna level out low to 0.5, and we're gonna plug it into mask input. So now the distance will extend these shapes to their edge, and now we can use it for creating height variation very easily, and we can also use it to shift the wood texture that will eventually be on top of these using warp, which is amazing. We will grab grayscale conversion, and we will convert the original float fill into grayscale. That is great because now we also have sort of like angular variation for each of the tiles. There is not that much variation. It's similar, well, I think maybe it's even the same for all the tiles. But what is important is that now we can have at least some sort of angle variation on each of these, which, you know, we won't overdo it. Just for a little bit of that extra variation, it's very nice to have. Now we're going to start with creating the base for our height map. We will grab uniform color, we will set it to grayscale, and we will set it to 0.5. The reason we're setting it to 0.5 is so that we get the middle gray. And if we use it in Octane, if we set the mid-level in displacement to 0.5, this gray will stay in place. It's not super important, but I like to use it like this because then the dents in our floor will go down, everything that's poking up will go up, but the base level will stay the same. So now we'll grab blend, and we will take our tile sampler to the top input, our uniform color to the bottom input, and we will set it to multiply. Now we will grab another blend. We will plug it into our last blend, and we will grab our flood fill converted to grayscale and plug it into the top input. And we will set it to overlay and go for like 0.1. We will tweak the value a little bit later. Now we will grab another blend. We'll plug it into the last one. And now we will plug this distance node into the top input. And once again, we will use overlay. And we will go for something like this. What will this do is that these darker ones will be lower than the brighter ones. So we will get another level of variation. Now we will grab Blur HQ Grayscale, and we will drag our tile sampler into it. We will set the quality to 1 and lower it. Something like 1.9. Now we will add a levels node, and we will try to clip it so that the blacks are more like this. And now we will grab another blend, plug it into the last blend before that, and we will plug the levels into the top input, and we will select subtract. Now we'll go way lower to something like 0.1, maybe even less, 0.05. What will this do is that wood has a tendency, not in these references, but generally when you have older floor, the wood, I'm not sure if it's from the moisture or why, but if you notice that really old planks or really old parquet floors, they have tendency to kind of like bend upward around the edges. So I thought it would be cool to include it a little bit here, but just a little bit. And now we will grab levels, plug our blend into it. Now we'll get one output, copy paste and grab another output, and grab a normal node. Now we will plug both into the levels, and we will set this output to normal and this output to height. Now we'll right click and view output in 3D. So now we see something. We will go to material, default, definitions, physically metallic roughness, and we will click on tessellation, which will open height settings. This is basically displacement, because right now we're only seeing the normal map. Now we will increase the scale. Don't go too overboard with it, but I don't know, like 5. It's good to go a bit higher than you would normally go, just so you see the height a little bit better. And we will increase the tessellation factor, because the lower you go, you can see it's basically like resolution of it. So we will tessellate it more, so we have nice smooth edges. Okay, that's looking very good. Now the only reason why I plug this level node here is so that I don't need to replug the height map into this and this, so I can keep it in just one node, and if I change it or I plug another blend in here or something, it will automatically update for both. So now we are going to create a little bit of chipped edges around these planks. We will start by grabbing slope blur grayscale, and we will plug our tile sampler into grayscale input. Then we will grab clouds 1, I guess. Yeah, I think clouds 1 are pretty good. And we will plug them into the slope blur grayscale. Now we will set the mode to min, increase the samples, and decrease the intensity a lot. So we want something like 0.03, maybe even a little bit less, maybe 0.02. And now we will add transformation 2D, and we will rotate this by 90 degrees. We will create a blend node, and we will plug our previous blend here, and we will plug the slope blur grayscale into the top input. You're gonna set it to multiply, and we are going to go way lower, like 0.1 maybe even less, but we can tweak that later. And we will use the transform 2D as a mask for this. So once we plug it back into this main output, you can see that we're getting a little bit of edge wear. It's not too visible, so let me just increase this to like 10. Obviously that's overkill, but it will illustrate what I'm doing way better. So now we can see that it's a bit too harsh. So maybe we'll just make it even smaller. Maybe even a little bit more, because we don't want there to be like these huge dents. Okay, and I still feel like some of these are too big, so I'm gonna go into our noise, and I'm gonna scale it down by 2. So now we get these much smaller ones, and we're going to tweak this a little bit more. Yes, I think that's pretty good. Remember, try not to overdo these steps, because I know that it's very tempting to just like go all out, you know, huge intensity, huge edge wear, but you know, in reality, if you look at these, there is barely any. There might be some more on these ones, but you know, we don't want to go overboard. We want just a little bit. I want something that is slightly bit more worn than this one, but you know, it's not like completely destroyed. So now that we set up our base for the height map, we will create the wood texture. Actually, we can do a little bit of sorting since the graph is starting to be a bit messy. So we will name this tiles. All right, base tile. Yeah, we will select these, add frame, flood, fill. We can name these chipped edges. Okay, so now let's get on with the wood texture. We will start by grabbing directional noise. Let's grab directional noise 1. We will grab clouds 1, and we will grab gradient linear 1, copy that one, so we have 2 instances, and grunge map 5. Nice. We will start with the gradient linears. So these gradients, we will tile them, let's say 175 and I don't know, like 110. This will help us get the grain on the wood hopefully. And we will blend these two so we get a bit of a variation in like the width and in the overall like, I don't know, intensity, I guess. Now we'll grab transformation 2D and we will plug the grunge into it and rotate it 90 degrees. Now we'll grab blend and we will blend these two with the grunge map as a mask. And you see we get these nice little variations here and there that follow this sort of like already pretty directional grunge. Now we'll grab levels. Because the gradient is linear, we want it to go a bit more. Now it goes like this, but we want to go more like this, so it's more curvy, the profile of the gradient. So we will grab our levels and we will tweak the gamma to be more something along the lines of this, I guess. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that should be good. To add a little bit of grain to this, we will grab fractal sum base and we will overlay it on top of this, because right now this is pretty precise, since, you know, it's basically like the, you know, mathematical gradient, so we need to break it up a tiny bit. So we will go and grab overlay, which will add this little bit of nice noise to it, but it's way too strong at the moment, so we will go like 0.15. Remember, with height maps, you always, when you layer stuff on top, you want to go like just in tiny increments, because, you know, the height maps are very sensitive. If you add like huge values of everything, you're gonna get crazy height map that won't look good. And we will tweak the fractal sum a little bit. So we will increase the roughness. We will play with the opacity. I think something like 1.5, that could be good. We will lower the max level to 10, so the grain is not so tiny. Now we will bring in blend and plug our directional noise into the middle output, and we will plug our gradient, into the top input, and we will blend between the two like so, something, I don't know, 1 point, and we will use these clouds as a mask to break it up a little bit. So now we should be, you know, now we should have something like this, maybe a little bit higher, so we have the grain of the wood is more pronounced. Now we will add some really quick warp variation to the wood by adding purlin noise and levels and directional warp. Now we will plug our blend into the source input and our purlin noise into our levels, into the intensity input, and we will scale the noise up a lot, because if you look at the reference, most of these are fairly large bends. You know, you have some little knots here and there, but we're not gonna bother with these today. They're not that hard to create, but it will, you know, add a bunch of notes, and we don't really have that much time for it, so I decided to just skip them. It looks good enough with just this. Now we will level them to something along the lines of this. You can probably play around with the random seed. Yeah, that could be good. And we will set this to like, I don't know, 250 or something. And we will play with the values to get something like this. Maybe 270. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, I think this is pretty decent. Like, obviously this is not the perfect way of doing it, but since we will be only seeing very narrow slices of this texture mapped onto the tiles or like the little planks, you know, it's gonna look good enough. Once we have our wood texture finished, we can select it, right click, add frame, wood texture, and we can move it a little bit further down here. Okay, now this will be the, I'd say, messiest and most complicated part. It's not really complicated, there's just a bunch of nodes, and it's kind of tedious to do, but it's really important to get the wood to follow the planks. So yeah, let's get right into it. I'm sure this will be like 20 takes before I get it right, so if there are any mistakes or something, please just, don't mind those, and just pause it when I'm finished and just copy the setup. Okay, so we will start by copying and pasting our tile sampler from before, and we are going to plug this tile into the pattern input. So now we get something like this. Now we will drag it down here, and now this is where the values of these individual planks become important, because we need to select all of these diagonal ones in this direction, then we need to select all of these in this direction, all of these, and all of these. And we will rotate our wood texture according to the direction of the plank. Let's start with the diagonal ones. We will grab Save, Transform, Grayscale. Be careful, don't do it with Transform 2D. I forgot that I have to use Save Transform for 45-degree rotation of the texture, and I ended up having so many tiling issues, and it took me like 2 hours before I figured out that I forgot to use Save Transform. So if you use Save Transform, you see that if you rotate it 45 degrees, it tiles correctly. If you used Transform 2D, on the other hand, and just rotated it, it would do this. Okay, so you want to avoid this and use just the Save Transform node for this. Now we will grab Directional Warp, and we will plug our Save Transform into the top input, and we will plug our distance into the bottom input. And this is a very cool trick to get rid of like tiling and continuous texture overlays, because if we just use the texture as is, all these, for instance, these planks right next to each other would have the same texture across them. The grain would just follow them across both of these. But since we have different value for this and this and this and this, we can warp it and move parts of the texture according to these values. So the brighter the value, the further it will move. So if we set it to something like 300, you can see that now the grain isn't continuous across these two, even though they have the same value here. Very nice. Now we're gonna copy and paste it, and we're gonna rotate it to 135, so we get the opposite direction. 135. So now we get the opposite diagonal direction, and we can play with the turn. That will randomize it a little bit more. Now we will grab Transform 2D, and we will plug this into Transform 2D, and we will rotate it 90 degrees. For 90 degrees rotation, you can use Transform 2D, and as you can see, it's a bit faster than using the Save Transform. It's not much of a difference, but just for the sake of slight optimizations. And we can copy and paste the directional warp and plug this into it. Now we will rotate this a little bit so that we get, that looks pretty good. See, so we don't get the same continuous texture over it, but it's separated now. And now we will add texture to these middle ones. As you can see in reference, sometimes it goes diagonally this way, sometimes this way, sometimes this way. So it seems fairly random. It probably isn't. I'm sure there was some, like design or like forethought before putting these there, but all we need is just a little bit of randomization there. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna grab histogram select, and we will plug our tile sampler into it, and we will go for 0 position. Oh, okay. And just 0.11 of range. And now we have these selected. So we will overlay this with our randomized values here, and then we will just clip them so we get some that are selected, some that aren't, and we will apply these 2 different diagonal ones randomly to them that way. So let's grab blend, and we will plug this into the top input, and we will just set it to multiply, and now we get random values distributed across it. Then we're gonna grab histogram scan, and we are going to clip it so that we have a even masks roughly half and half. Well, it's not half and half, but it's just pretty evenly distributed. And now we will just copy and paste these 2. The reason I'm copy pasting these 2 and not just reusing them is because we want to change the warp a little bit to avoid, again, continuous application of the same texture around it. Now we will grab blend, and we will plug this as a mask, and we will plug this into the top layer and this into the bottom layer. So now we have some that are this way, some that are this way. Now all we need to do is to assign each of these directions to their correct planks in the texture. So we will do that. You could either do it with many blends, but I figured out a way around it using multi-material blend. It's probably not the fastest way, but it's much cleaner and much easier to do. So we will drag it in, and we will turn off all the channels except for, I don't know, opacity, for instance. We will grab gradient map, because unfortunately it only accepts color map as an input for the mat ID. So we will convert our tile sampler into color map and plug it in. And now we can start plugging in these materials. So we will start by plugging this one into material number 1, material number 2. As I was editing this part, I realized that I added a node for one of the texture directions and didn't add it into the screen cap. So just to make sure that you guys are not missing it, I added one directional warp for the untransformed texture. It's right there in the middle, and I just plugged it into the second input. That's all it is. Okay, back to the tutorial. Material number 3, 4, and 5. Now all we need to do is to double click on this, and then click once on this, and we will just go and color pick the right value. So material number 1 is black, that is fine. Material number 2 is horizontal planks, so we will select this one. Material number 3 is vertical planks, so we will select those. Click. Material number 4 is diagonal in this direction, so we will select these planks. And material number 5 are the remaining other direction diagonal planks. So now we assigned all of these without using a single blend, and with just one single node. So now we can just, I don't know, place it somewhere around here. We can select this and right click, add frame, blank masks, and we can grab blend and blend those on top of our height map base. We can overlay them and go like 0.1. And voila, we have wood applied to our tiles. Now we will add a bit more variation and a bit more sort of like edge damage. So let's start with blur HQ grayscale. We're gonna plug it into our chipped edges. I don't know, blur it for like 0.7 something. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now we will grab levels, because we want to select just the edges and apply the wear to those. So we will get this and we will invert it. If you flip these two, you can invert the input. I don't know, something like this. It's probably good. Now we will grab ambient occlusion. What ambient occlusion does is the same as in Octane or any other 3D context. We want to select just these dark dents, so set it to 16 samples and we will invert it. So now all our dents are selected and we will level it. You could obviously do it in single level like I did before, but I wanted to show you both ways because this one is a bit more understandable, I'd say. Okay, now we will grab blend and we will plug our ambient occlusion into the top and our levels into the bottom one. And now we will just use subtract. And now you can see that we get these nice dents here are where there's actually dent in the height map. And we will also then be able to use this as a mask to create like some variation around the edges. It's not so visible in this one, but here you can see that these edges tend to be a little bit brighter and it usually follows the grain a little bit. So that's sort of a nice detail. And now we will also add another blend and we will plug our map in here and we will go for screen. So now all the dents in the grain of the wood would be even deeper with this, but what we want to do is to mask it out so it's just here and there, so we can add a little bit of like missing coating here and there in these dents. So let's grab grunge map. Oh, I know which one is this. One seems pretty good, and we will lower the balance, something like this. We just want a little bit of variation for it, and we will plug it in here. Now you see we have these little dents here and there, but you can see that it's a fair bit brighter than the edge ones, which we do not want. So we will just lower it a bit. Okay, now we will just blend it back into our map. We'll grab blend and we will plug this in the top input and select subtract, and we will dial it down a lot, like 0.05. And you see we get these nice chipped edges with the grain, and also we get these like little dents here and there. You can tweak this, you can use different one, you can blur it, you can add levels and control it that way. But I think for our purpose this is good enough. Now I feel like this is looking pretty good. We might want to add a little bit more, now if I show you how this variation affects it, if we go higher, you can see that we get a higher variation between the individual planks. And if we look at this flat fill one, and if we increase it, we will get this like that they are more angled and rotated. So we go, I don't know, 0.5, I think that's enough. You don't want to go overboard. Of course, if you were doing like some really old moldy floor, that might be a good option, but I'm trying to go for something more clean here. I also feel that our wood is a bit too harsh, or maybe it's not. Oh, it is. Let's just dial it down a little bit. What I usually do is that I adjust the values based on the scene, so I'll use them in Octane and then I will do a little bit of back and forth to see how they work. We can also make this less extreme. So I think now we have much better representation of what we have here. So now we can start adding some details to the height map. We can grab fur 3. We will disorder it, add more waves, scale it up, and we will grab a blend and a histogram scan. We will plug the fur into histogram scan. We'll increase the contrast and we will move the position up. And you see now we get these like very random dents and little scratches and stuff. It's amazing. I actually completely stole this trick from Joshua Lynch. I bought a class from him from Gumroad for, what was it? I think it was bricks, and he used this and I've been using it ever since, and I gotta say it's amazing. Definitely check out Joshua's tutorials and his classes. In my opinion, he's one of the best substance designer artists and like teachers around. Very good stuff. So we will just plug this into the top input and plug our previous blend into the bottom input. Then we're gonna plug it into our levels. And we're just going to select subtract and go like 0.05, maybe even lower. Maybe even lower. And you see now we get these little dents, which is great. And since this is a floor, we can also add some scratches. So we will grab a scratches generator. And this is like, you can really have fun with this and try different stuff, but I'll just scale the splines so they're a little bit smaller. I'll add a little bit of distortion to them, and I'll grab a blend, plug them into the top input, plug this into the bottom input, then plug it back into the levels and subtract, and we will go 0.002 or like 0.02, and that's still a bit too much, so go 0.01. That's much better. We can grab, I know, like fractal noise, fractal sum, add a little bit of that. Now we can increase it into the mask. Now we can increase the values a little bit, maybe not so much, just like 0.02. You know, you can really have fun and try different masks. You know, you can warp it, you can just try different stuff. Or I just want to show you how to get decent bass, and then you can customize it all you want. That's what's so good about Substance Designer. Yeah, and I think this will be it for the first part of this tutorial. Yay, we did it. Oh, okay, before we end, we should probably frame these. So these will be edge wear. These can be dents. And these will be add frame scratches. Bam. Now we're finished. Yay. Okay. I will see you in the second part. I don't know, probably in about a week's time or something. Okay, so that's going to be it for today's tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something new. Please leave a like if you liked the video. Please comment if you have any questions. And don't forget to subscribe. It really means a lot to me. Also, I will leave a link to my Patreon in the description. So if you'd like to get some textures or maybe some scene files from the tutorials, don't forget to check it down below. Yeah, that's going to be it for today. See you later. Bye.